Stranger Things might have given us one of the most anticipated finales in television history. Still, the way season 5 actually wrapped up left so many fans feeling like something was missing. And the insane thing is that with just a few tweaks, this finale could have been breathtaking. However, what we got instead felt rushed, convenient, and honestly, like the writers had forgotten some of their own rules. But here's where it gets interesting, because there's one specific change that would have elevated everything, and when you hear it, you're going to realize just how much emotional power this finale left on the table. Before we get to that heartbreaking moment that should have destroyed us all, let's talk about how the final battle itself needed a complete change. The Mind Flayer has been set up as this telepathic, psychological terror that gets inside people's heads and manipulates them from within. We've seen it torture Will across multiple seasons, we've watched it speak through Billy, and we know it can create visions that feel completely real. So it was awkward when the final confrontation turned into just another action sequence with guns, fire, and explosions. Where was the psychological horror that made this villain so terrifying in the first place? However, here's what should have happened. In the final battle, the Mind Flayer should have separated everyone and trapped them in mental torture visions where they had to overcome their own personal darkness to weaken it. The Mind Flayer can speak telepathically. It's been established that it mentally tortures its victims in ways similar to Vecna, so why wouldn't it use that power in the final fight? Instead of Elle fighting Vecna, each character should have been pulled into their own psychological nightmare where they face their deepest fears and greatest regrets all at once. Will, Mike, Joyce, and Steve would all be even more motivated by their grief to destroy Vecna after what happens, which we'll get to in a minute, and the resist him concept would have been perfect. Each character overcoming their darkness would physically weaken the Mind Flayer, making their emotional victories actually matter to the plot. It's not just about shooting things anymore, it's about inner strength, the bonds they've formed, which this show has always been about. And speaking of those bonds, let's talk about Max and Elle's reunion, because this is another moment that deserved so much more weight than it got. Elle initially brought Max back from the dead at the end of season 4, so their reunion in season 5 should have carried that history, which is the debt of life itself. Instead, it felt rushed, almost like an afterthought. Max waking up should have been one of the most emotional scenes of the entire season, but it barely registered because the show was too busy wrapping up several other plots. However, there's something even more frustrating about how certain characters were handled in the finale, and it stems from plot holes that could have been fixed with a single change. In the hospital scene, Robin should have thrown the radio away to distract the demo dog so everyone can escape, and Max is supposed to wake up because she hears Lucas's voice, since all she needed was Lucas and not the radio. However, a bigger fix should have also happened in this scene. It should have been Elle who destroyed the demo dogs, not Karen, who shouldn't even be able to move or walk after everything she's been through, so having her suddenly become an action hero makes no sense. But Elle has the power, motivation, and connection to Max. It would have been so much more satisfying to see Elle protect Max one more time, using her abilities to clear the path. But here's where things get really interesting, and this is only the beginning of the part you've been waiting for, the change that would have made this finale absolutely unforgettable. We need to talk about what should have happened to Nancy and Jonathan, because this is the emotional gut punch the show desperately needed but refused to deliver. The show has always played it safe with its core characters. Although we lost Bob, Eddie, and the characters we liked, the show has been terrified to touch the original crew, the people we've known since the very beginning, and that safety, that unwillingness to take real risks, made the stakes feel lower than they should have been for a final season. So here's what should have happened, and just thinking about it is devastating. Nancy and Jonathan should have died in the melting room, not a quick one or an off-screen demise, but a slow, horrifying, heartbreaking one where they're trapped together as the room literally melts around them. Nancy and Jonathan have been through everything together. Their relationship has been complicated. They've broken up and gotten back together. They've grown up in the chaos of fighting interdimensional monsters, and despite everything, they still love each other. They still have this connection that goes back to season 1, when Jonathan was the weird kid with the camera, and Nancy was the girl trying to find her missing friend. And as they find themselves in the melting room, they both know there's no way out. They're holding each other, trying to stay calm, but the reality is setting in, and it's how it ends. The scene should be long enough to hurt, especially after the unproposal, and then, slowly, inevitably, they're gone. When Steve and Dustin finally reach them, when they burst through that door expecting to pull their friends to safety, all that's left is Nancy's ring, just lying there in the melted destruction, with their friends never getting to know the true purpose of the ring. Steve's face seeing this would have been golden. He has been in love with Nancy since the beginning, watched her choose Jonathan, and made peace with it, becoming their friend anyway. Steve, who has spent 5 seasons growing from the popular jock into this protective, caring, self-sacrificing person who would die for any of these kids. Finding that ring would destroy him. And Dustin, who looked up to both of them, who connected with them in his own way, seeing Steve break down would break him too. This moment, this discovery, would haunt them for the rest of their lives. But here's why this death matters beyond just the shock value. Nancy and Jonathan dying this way would give Steve's character a chance to deal with major grief in the epilogue. Throughout the entire show, Steve has lost people, but he's never had to process the death of someone he truly loved. And yes, he loved Nancy even after she chose Jonathan. Having to carry that grief, having to live with the knowledge that the girl he loved died horribly and he couldn't save her, that would be such a powerful character moment for Steve. We'd see him in the epilogue still struggling and probably visiting their graves. And it would make his Beanstalk plan even more powerful. The Beanstalk plan, the final desperate strategy to defeat Vecna, should come from a place of rage and grief and determination. Steve would be channeling everything he feels about losing Nancy and Jonathan into this one last mission. It wouldn't just be about saving the world anymore. It would be personal. It would be about making their deaths mean something, about ensuring that no one else has to die the way they did. Also, Will, Mike, and Joyce would all be even more motivated by their grief to destroy Vecna. Each of them lost something in this fight. That collective grief would fuel them in the final confrontation. It would make every punch, every decision, every sacrifice hit harder because we'd understand exactly what's driving them. The epilogue would be so much more meaningful too. Instead of just a happy ending where everyone's alive and moving on, we'd see them trying to rebuild their lives while carrying this massive loss. There's more grief in the epilogue, absolutely, but ultimately, the bonds that still exist get the characters through. That's the real message of Stranger Things. It's not about defeating the monster, it's about the connections, the people, and the found family that helps to survive the impossible. Hopper and Joyce would be closer than ever, helping each other heal. Will and Mike would lean on each other. Steve would have Dustin and Robin. They'd all be broken, but they'd be broken together, and somehow that would be enough. There's also something poetic about Hopper's moment in the woods that connects to this. After everything that happened, Hopper goes to the woods and leaves Eggos where he found Elle in season 1, showing he's still waiting for her, still holding on to hope even when everything seems lost. This moment would hit so much harder if we'd just watched Nancy and Jonathan die, because it would show that even in the darkest times, even after they've lost the people they love, they keep going, they keep hoping, and they keep leaving Eggos in the woods for the people who might come back. But that's not all. In the end, it was almost as if the whole gang went through all of that with no consequences from the military, which is where Dr. Owens's turning up with more military support and Dr. K's being arrested for her black ops activities would have made sense. The gang walking away scot-free after everything they've done, all the chaos they've caused, needed some reckoning. There should be a scene between Hopper and Owens in which they agree to bury everything that happened, so these kids can have some normal life after all this. It would be a bittersweet ending, with everyone understanding that some secrets must remain buried. And finally, that mental torture vision concept we mentioned earlier ties everything together perfectly. The final battle shouldn't just be physical, it should force each character to confront their trauma, their fears, their regrets. While Elle fights Vecna in the real world, everyone else should be fighting their own internal battles in these nightmare visions the Mind Flayer creates. Each person overcoming their personal darkness would weaken the Mind Flayer's hold on reality, making resistance the key to victory. This is how Stranger Things 5 should have ended, with real stakes, real consequences, real grief, and real hope.